Dude, this is sublime. You're gonna make me spend $3 grand. Hello, welcome back to Flywheel Films. My name is Austin, and we like Miatas. So I have a very special video for y'all today. Thanks to some good friends, I have assembled 3 NCs, and we are doing a suspension comparison. Jordan and I have reviewed suspension before, both on our own cars and some others, but we have never compared 3 NC Miata suspension options all at once. So I'm extremely excited to take these cars out. Before we get into it, I need to address suspension feel is an extremely subjective thing. I have driven a lot of NCs at this point with a ton of different setups, so I like to think my opinion carries some weight. But in order to help you as the viewer follow along, I'm going to score these cars in 3 different categories, 1 out of 10. Price, comfort, and driving enjoyment. And I'm gonna try to explain why I score each car in the way that I do, so you can kind of follow along and pick out the things that matter to you. So every car is gonna have a score out of 30 by the end of this, and we'll be scoring them in each category kind of as we talk about them. So really excited. We'll get into it first by just chatting about each setup, and then we're gonna talk about how much they cost and an initial like why you bought them. So let's get into that. So we'll start with my 2006 NC Miata. This is going to be our budget option. Thanks to Moss Motors, we have equipped the Eibach and IL Motorsport lowering springs to this car. I did a whole install video on those. These are $275 or right around there, depending on whether or not they're on sale. And so by far the cheapest option as far as suspension. The hidden cost with lowering springs is struts if you need to replace them. However, these are designed to work with your OE non-Bilstein struts for your NC Miata. But if you do need to replace those, that can be an additional cost. And the other additional cost that can be there is installation. Lowering spring install is a lot more involved than a coilover because you have to disassemble and reassemble stuff. So if you're not doing the install yourself and you're paying to have it done, keep that in mind. Because these springs are so much cheaper than the other options, we are going to give them an 8 out of 10 for our price score. So this is definitely going to be the leader in the price segment. Only reason they're not a 10 out of 10 is there are some cheaper lowering spring options, and like I said, there can be some additional hidden costs. So with the mid-tier option, we have my good friend Jeff here in his 2011 Special Edition. This car is equipped with the Meister R Zeta CRD coilovers. So this is going to be kind of the middle of the road option. When these were new, they came in at about $1,300. Jeff, why did you pick up a kind of the mid-tier Meister coilovers?
Yeah, so when I was going to shop for the Miata, I've owned a lot of cars. I've done lowering springs. I've unfortunately owned a set of CX Racing coilovers on a Veloster Turbo a long time ago.
There you go.
So I know what cheap coilovers feel like.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like metal rods underneath your car connecting to the ground. So I knew I didn't want to go with the cheap coilover option. If you were shopping for coilovers 3-4 years ago, everyone was suggesting the MeisterR ZetaCRDs. I went with them. They've been exactly what I wanted. You know, maybe it's not the track level performance, but between daily driving, getting the lower level I wanted, and then still handling the corners really well, yeah. I felt like they delivered for their price point.
For sure. I think the Meister brand for the NC Miata is probably one of the most recommended I've seen across forums and groups. I think for good reason. After driving quite a few cars that have had any Meister coilover, they're pretty solid. So I'm going to give this one a score of 6.5 out of 10 as far as price goes. Yeah, the Meister is such a good option for those who are wanting something that is more budget friendly than like say a Xida or an Öhlins, but they still have a ton of features. So I'm gonna give these a 6.5 out of 10 on price because they are kind of near the middle, but you get a tremendous amount of value as far as like suspension adjustment, ride quality, all that. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but I think the value that you get with a Meister is really fantastic, which is why it's a little bit above a 5 of like the middle of the road. Nahum, you've been on the channel before. This is your lovely 2009 competition yellow NC. Did a whole video breakdown on this. Big fan of this car. I actually haven't driven it yet, so I'm really excited to do that. But before we get into the driving, let's talk about what you have on your car. So this is the top tier in the comparison. These are the Zeta coilovers.
Right, with an X, not a Z.
With the X. It's Zeta, super confusing.
Yeah, that's probably why, I mean.
Yeah, anyway, the Xida is definitely the most expensive option. It comes in around $3,000, so not cheap, but they have some very impressive technology in these coilovers, which is why NAM went for them. But NAM, your words, why did you decide to pick up these Xida coilovers for your car?
I think comfort, adjustability, and I guess quality.
Yeah.
You know, I've had OEM on here before, and those, when I got the car, had OEM shocks, the rears are blown. So I actually replaced it with the MeisterR CRDs and drove those for like 2 years. And then when I moved out here, I got the
Xidas. Okay.
Xidas.
That's right. So you've kind of ran the gambit of all three of these. These are, like I said, by far the most expensive option, so these are going to score the worst in this category. I think I'm going to give them a 3.5 out of 10 because, believe it or not, you can get much more expensive coilovers than Xidas on your car. And I do think from like a value perspective, it is really impressive the specs that these coilovers have, even for the hefty price tag of $3,000. So we'll start in my car once again. We're in the budget option. And I'm gonna be taking every car down the same stretch of road to give it as equal of a comparison as I can. I'm gonna start with comfort, and then I'll talk about driving enjoyment after that. Granted, comfort in my eyes is more of like a road trip. How long can you hang out in the car before you're over how bumpy it is? In the comfort department, I am really not a huge fan of the lowering springs because you're using the OEM strut, but just less of it because it's a shorter spring. Some of the bumps and how it handles bumps isn't ideal. It can be a little more bouncy than I'd like it to be over stuff. It's not super settled. So that's probably my biggest gripe in the comfort department, but it's kind of a known issue with lowering springs. I would say there's not a lot of people who put lowering springs on their car expecting to really improve the ride quality. Usually it's to get the car lower and have it be a little stiffer. I mean, I was impressed with how well these rode for lowering springs because it's still not a bad place to be and still pretty comfortable. But compared to some of the other cars I've driven, definitely leaves a decent amount to be desired. But for that $300 price point, not a bad option. If you're not super mindful of how comfortable you want to be, definitely still a really solid option. I think for comfort, I'm probably going to give these, I don't know, probably a 3 out of 10 because I think, like I said, there's quite a bit to be desired as far as suspension feel with how floaty it is. How well it takes bumps is probably the biggest downside to me of it. Like I said, really bouncy, not the most controlled over bigger bumps and undulation in the road. But better than I expected for such a cheap option. Still pleasantly surprised for the price at how well these drive and how comfortable they are. As far as driving enjoyment, I definitely think these are a pretty big improvement over stock. Lowering the center of gravity helps quite a bit with any car. And I definitely felt the car get firmed up from dropping it substantially. It's not as dialed as you'd want it to be. You can tell it's a piggyback solution, but still a huge improvement over stock. If you compare it to some of the other options we're going to look at today, definitely lacking as far as how sharp it feels, how much body roll there is, kind of back to that conversation in the comfort section. You just wish it was a little less rolly through the corners. Nam kind of worded it well when we were chatting earlier. You still have that body roll, and if you know how to drive with it, you can still have fun. Once it kind of settles in to that bump stop, you can kind of lean on it. But not the flattest cornering experience, and not the most, I don't know. I keep saying balanced, but I feel like that's what I think this setup lacks, is really nice balance.
You have factory sway bars on this, or is it,
I have
are they
a
modified?
aftermarket rear, stock front, racing beat rear. Driving enjoyment overall, I give it a 4. Very big improvement over stock, but I think there is a lot more you can gain with a more complete suspension setup. Same guy, different guy, different Miata. If you watch the channel, I was recently driving Jeff's car in this same position. But now I get to talk specifically about suspension, and more importantly, how it compares to my car. It's better. So my brother Jordan's car obviously has these as well, and between seat time and that car and this car, I spent a lot of time with the Zeta CRDs, and I'm a really big fan. I think Meister is very much known for their value as far as what you get for the money, and they are consistently, like we talked about earlier, one of the most recommended mid-tier options. Yeah. And for very good reason. This is very comfortable. You're not feeling every little crack and pebble in the road, but it is extremely planted, very balanced. It takes corners. I mean, you have sways as well, which I need to keep in mind in this comparison, that it's not just coilovers I'm feeling in all these cars.
True.
You have 17s instead of 16s like Nam and I, and you have front and rear sways. But as far as comfort, so the first segment I want to talk about, these are great. They're extremely comfortable. They do have a lot of adjustability when it comes to your comfort as well.
Yeah.
So you can set them to like soft or hard depending on your usage. If you're dailying it or if you're tracking it, you can adjust it with the little knobs that they have.
I'm probably at like the 65 to 70% hard, a little bit over the straight midpoint. And I find it pretty comfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously curbs are still bad, but
for sure.
Yeah.
But for like, this is a fairly smooth road, but like, wow, still extremely comfortable, but you're not losing any of the connection to the road that you would desire from lowering your car.
Yeah.
So yeah, really big fan of that. It is not like the smoothest thing ever. I have been in like performance cars that are a little bit more comfortable. So I think for that reason, this is going to be like a 7.5, because it is for sure way above average.
Yeah,
but
it's not your $800 coilover for
yes.
sure. Yeah, I feel like it's kind of a little bit above where you want on average. It's not the best performing.
Yeah, but once again, I want to drive home like the value that these coilovers have. Extremely, extremely impressive for the price.
Yeah.
And especially, so we mentioned this before, but the Zeta CRD is no longer in production. Meister has kind of adjusted their product lineup, And I think the most similar option they have to the Zeta CRD is now the Sport-Z, which is actually only $1,000.
Oh,
so
nice.
It's gotten like cheaper. It's the same CRD technology. Their closed ratio dampening, I think is what that stands for. The spring rates are slightly different from the Sport-Z to the Zeta CRD. I think the Sport-Zs have a little bit more of a compliant front spring.
Yeah, a little more balanced.
A little softer, which I definitely understand why they'd want to do that, to make it a little bit more comfortable. And then they have some new offerings too that are pretty interesting. So as far as specs go, I'm going to talk a little bit more about specs with the Meisters and the Xidas compared to stock, but these have some pretty solid travel numbers, which is part of what lends to that comfort as far as like suspension travel. And then, like I mentioned before, the spring rates are not crazy stiff, so you're not going to be feeling absolutely everything.
And I can't put enough emphasis on that price gap for your low tier coilovers,
yes,
and that 7/8 to the mid tier and the 1,000-ish. You will feel that.
You will
so
absolutely
prevalent.
feel that. That
it
is
worth the most $400 worth increase on your suspension.
100%. I think that's a really great point, and especially in a car like a Miata where handling is everything.
Yeah.
You want to park your money on a mod like suspension and coilovers in particular, because they will either make you enjoy the handling that much more or make you wish it was better that much more. So I think the jump, like Jeff said, from a really entry-level cheap coilover to something like this is so worth the extra money. I strongly urge those who are pinching their pennies and want to get like just the cheapest possible way to lower their car. Like I talked about with the lowering springs, you can lower your car for cheap, but it will come with compromises. And for a Miata, I don't think you should compromise with your suspension. I really don't. So comfort, 7.5, and then driving enjoyment. This is an extremely big upgrade from stock as far as driving enjoyment in my eyes. One of the biggest reasons is, granted the sways help with this, but body roll is nearly eliminated.
Yeah.
It corners very flat, but not only does it corner flat, because I said that about my lowering springs, it is extremely balanced through those corners. A small bump doesn't upset the whole car. And you're not, unlike the lowering springs, you're not waiting for the car to hit bump stops where you can really lean into it.
Yeah.
The suspension is balanced and stiff enough to where you can lean on it before you hit bump stops. You have a lot of confidence taking corners in this at higher speed, and you feel like the car is doing what you want it to do, as opposed to you kind of fighting the floatiness of it. So massive upgrade over stock, and a really substantial upgrade over something like a lowering spring as well. I gave my car pretty harsh score on the comfort. I gave it a little bit of a higher score on the driving enjoyment, because I do think lowering springs are a big improvement over stock with that. But I think it is safe to say that this is double my score with driving improvement. I'm going to give it an 8 because it's so good. Like, suspension really can make or break your driving experience, and it can make you enjoy your car so much more. And Meister Zeta CRD or Sport-Z, I have no reservations about encouraging NC Miata folks to pick up a set.
Yeah.
They are a really solid option, and the community has kind of already decided that. You see so many people say, pick up Meisters, buy Meisters. If you're in that $1,000 to $1,500 range, there are some really good options for NCs above that, which we're about to show you, one of them. But if you're in that like $1,000 range, there's not a whole lot else that I think is as highly recommended as the Meisters.
Yeah, it's the great part about the Mazda Miata community is it really is a great community of people trying to support each other on
For
mods.
sure.
And if you read, you know, and follow the guys who are out there getting that track experience, and you'll see their, you know, the reviews, and that's kind of what drove me to the CRDs. And I think Meister's new Sport-Zs, I'm really excited to see some reviews on those. Especially coming down $200.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not, you know, it's not a ton of money, but that makes a difference.
It does make a difference. Yeah.
So I think putting them at $1,000 mark makes them really affordable.
talked about the budget. We've talked about the mid-tier. This is what I was most excited about because although I've done a video with Nam's car, I have yet to drive it. And what a treat. You can probably tell I'm a lot lower than the other cars because Nam has a really nice, what kind of seat is this?
Marad LX2.
Okay. I'd say I wasn't a brand I remembered off the top of my head, but really enjoy sitting further in the car. Really nice support. The suspension feel in this is sublime. It's very good. Totally get why, if you were really into driving your NC a lot, why you'd want to spend $3,000 on a set of Xidas, because these feel phenomenal. Some quick specs on the Zeta that I think will kind of play into our conversation of both comfort and driving enjoyment. They have a lot of travel. I think some of the longest travel numbers of any coilover for the NC, maybe aside from one, which I think really helps with the comfort.
Yeah, I think it's almost as much as OEM.
It's like, yeah, almost as much as OEM, which you don't typically see in an aftermarket coilover option. Usually lose travel, and I think that's what makes these so comfortable. So this is the Zeta Grand Touring option. They have a few different options. You can get something that's more track oriented, but this is the Grand Touring, which is more kind of comfort and daily oriented, which obviously makes sense for how most people use their car. And it's so nice. It's compliant over bumps. You don't feel like hardly anything as far as the little things that you don't want to feel, but you still feel super connected to the road. So along with some really nice travel, you have a larger diameter piston than most other aftermarket coilovers. You have a really neat inverted shock design in the rear, which I think is what allows them to have so much travel. And then, of course, some really nice materials that they use. A lot of thought has been put into all the components with it. And I think, obviously, that's what you're paying for, is really nice materials and a lot of engineering. I think before we get into a little bit more of the conversation about why Nam decided to go for the Zeta, I think for comfort, I'm going to give these like a 9. These are so comfortable while maintaining some really nice driving feel. I think this is by far the most balanced NC I've driven as far as just overall comfort and driving feel. It's so good. Totally understand.
It's way more comfortable than factory. That's a given.
It's more comfortable than factory, but way more involving than factory. And I could see how, like on long road trips and such, that this car would be so easy to just spend a lot of time in. So very high score for comfort. I was kind of anticipating this being the most comfortable car, but I didn't think it would be by as big of a margin. I think with cost for coilovers, there's kind of a, what is it, the law of diminishing return?
Right.
Where the Meisters are great for what they are, and there's tremendous value there. But to get better than the Meisters, you gotta spend a lot more money. What was kind of your like bigger factors as to, because you said you had the Zeta CRDs for a little while and then you decided to upgrade to the Xidas. What was like the really big factor that made you want to make that jump?
Mainly driving out here. A lot of the back roads, well, I mean, we're on a smooth road right now, but a lot of the back roads have very uneven pavement just from freeze thaw or just, you know, animal damage or trailer damage. So when you're lowering your car, especially with the two-piece coilover, you're gonna either give up bump travel or droop. So that was the main thing where I would feel the car not have any wheel, not have a wheel on the ground, basically, which is kind of sketchy when you're mid-turn. Oh, turtle. So yeah, it was a big difference going onto these Xidas.
Yeah.
And I actually got to ride in one of the prototype cars when they were...
Oh, very cool.
Before they did the initial release. So once I got on a ride with Sonny there, it was pretty much sealed the deal.
This is potentially going to be a very expensive drive for me as well. We'll see how things shake out.
Yeah, I had, at the time, money burning a hole in my pocket.
If I had money burning a hole in my pocket, it'd be, I think, really hard for me to choose between like coilovers like these and like putting that money towards like a turbo after driving Jordan's car. I've been doing a lot of expensive.
You probably just have to do both.
Yeah, I think I will have to do both eventually. That's for sure.
Just you know, it's not the smart thing to do. Just don't put that money into your 401k for a year, and you'll have all your money.
Oh man, I totally understand that with Arkansas roads. I'd say this road is uncharacteristically smooth for a lot of the back roads that we have here. We have some really, really enjoyable curvy mountain roads, but I'd say the overwhelming majority of them have a road surface that probably could be refinished. So you get these really nice roads with really fun corners and elevation change, but it's really common to have those roads, like Nam said, with potholes or just uneven pavement through them. So
yeah, you go north a little bit to Missouri and you'll definitely see it.
Yeah, Missouri is definitely, I think, worse than Arkansas, but here I think we've been on quite a few cruises together at this point, and on every cruise there's at least one section of road where you want to carry some good pace because it's really fun corners and bends, but it feels sketchy too whenever there's dips in the concrete and dips in the road, because like you said, you can kind of feel that lack of droop, and when you don't have a wheel contacting the cement when you're taking a corner at like 40-50 miles an hour, it's a little freaky, a little scary.
Yeah, I don't even slow down for a railroad crossing at all. I just send it.
That might be the mark of like a very comfortable car, just not slowing down for a railroad crossing. I don't do that in my GX, but that's about the only car right now that I don't really slow down for. I definitely do in my Miata. So driving enjoyment in this car, also, holy cow. I think because the same factors that give it a really nice ride and very comfortable ride plays into the driving enjoyment. Like Nam said, the additional travel and droop gives a lot of confidence. Granted, on this road, Jeff's car felt pretty similar because it's such a smooth road that travel doesn't really come into play quite as much. What I think is really fascinating about the Xida coilovers compared to the MeisterR Zeta coilovers is Xida recommends to not run upgraded sway bars.
With the Grand Touring.
With the Grand Touring, because that would just stiffen the ride where they want it to be a little bit more comfortable and compliant. So Nam opted to have stock sways, but add some chassis bracing, which I think is a really interesting combo of mods, and I think it's, in this case, has worked really, really well, because you have this really supple, compliant ride, but the car still feels really stiff and corners really level. And it's just something that I haven't really experienced too much, because a lot of times you equate stiffness with harshness, and I don't necessarily think that that has to be the case, and this kind of proves that. So Jeff's car is running like the MeisterR ZetaCRDs with front and rear sways from Progress, so his car is definitely a little bit stiffer and a little bit harsher on these roads, where Nam's car is just cruises on these extremely comfortable, but equally or probably even more involving, just because of how rigid the chassis is. Still get great feedback through these corners. I still feel like I have a really good sense of what the car is doing. I think because of that driving enjoyment, I'm giving these, I don't know, a 9.5. Is that too much?
The nice thing with these coilovers is you could just crank them up to make them stiffer on the damping side and take them out to the track. Or if you end up turning your car to a race car, just get new springs. It's the same damper assembly, and you're ready to go.
And Xida runs Swift springs on the setup, right?
Right. But yeah, I had an old Integra that had It was probably like a $5,000 car and had $3,000 coilovers on it.
Oh man.
And that kind of opened my eyes to just how much a difference suspension makes. Because prior to that, I had lowering springs with aftermarket shocks, and I thought that rode well. But the coilovers it was a full-blown race suspension. I think it was like a 12K front rear, on which I was on a Tegra, really stiff.
Yeah.
But it rode great.
Wow. Yeah, I think if you have the money and your budget allows to do something like this, do it. You will not regret it, whether you use your car for road tripping or canyon carving or especially track driving. Investing in suspension like this, I think, is a very, very good place to put your money. Like I said in Jeff's car, I think regardless of how much you spend on your suspension, it is worth putting some time and effort into the selection that you have and putting some good money into that. I don't think you should cheap out on suspension by any means. But I do think, like a lot of things, the more you spend, the better it is.
Never cheap out on tires and suspension.
Yeah, tires and suspension. And that's another interesting thing too, is you're on 16-inch Watanabes. So similar setup to my car, same tire size. And Jeff's on 17s. So he has a little less sidewall, which also helps the handling with his car. But
yeah,
even,
a little sharper turn in.
For sure, but even with more sidewall, this car is just on rails.
That's very cliche.
So to summarize my thoughts on NAM's Xidas, there is a tremendous amount of upside to them. Obviously, they balance comfort and handling really nicely. So if you value both of those things very heavily, I think it's worth spending the money, because to get both of those things at the level of these Xidas is not going to be cheap. I think one of the downsides that NAM just mentioned that I think is absolutely worth bringing up is a coilover like this has a rebuild interval where they need to be serviced more regularly than a typical coilover that you'd see as like a Meister or something along those lines. So it's not just an added upfront cost, there are kind of recurring costs down the road, which is definitely something to take into consideration when buying a coilover like this. I just had a great day. I got to drive 3 super fun Miatas and score them. I really hope that this video is beneficial for you if you're looking for suspension for your Miata or other enthusiast vehicle. To summarize, I will put the scores on the screen here. I'll give some quick thoughts as to my overall feelings towards the suspension options we have here. If I were to do it again and just go buy some coilovers for my car, I think I would end up with Meisters. The reason being is you get a lot for your money and they are a very well-rounded coilover for the price. After driving NAM's NC with the Xidas on it, I totally understand why people will spend a lot of money on suspension. And if you have a healthy budget to put in your car for suspension and handling, it's a great place to spend it, especially on a Miata. I can't recommend the Xidas enough, but it is a extremely high price in comparison to the other 2 options. I will say I think the lowering springs do have a place, even though I probably wouldn't buy them again, because I really do think that the lowering springs, they lower your car and that's about it. You definitely have compromises in other areas, and for me personally, I would rather have a better all-around ride for the additional money than be a little bit more compromised in comfort and handling just for the car to be low. So those are my thoughts. Let me know if you agree or disagree down in the comments. There will be a lot more NC content coming your way here soon, so if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do so. We'll catch you on the next one.
Rock. White, shiny black.
You think it's a rock, or you think that's a segment of like some pottery or something? These coilovers are very okay. Yeah, they are tremendously all right.
Yeah, that's awesome, bro.
What a pretty road, man.